They say rank never retires, it remains with you long after you hang up the uniform. Seems to be the thinking in Taiwan as well. 3 of India's retired defense chiefs are in Taipei. Former Army Chief General Manoj Naravne, former Navy Chief Admiral Karambir Singh and former Air Force Chief Air Chief Marshal RKS Bhaduria. What are they doing in Taiwan? All 3 of them are attending the Catering Forum. It is an annual event on Indo-Pacific security. It is organized by Taiwan's government, so Taipei invited and they agreed. On paper, this is all unofficial. This delegation does not represent the Indian government. But unofficially, the message is quite clear. India is stepping up engagement with Taiwan. Not just cultural or economic engagement, but also strategic engagement. The 3 retired officers are expected to hold talks with Taiwanese leaders. They will also offer India's views on the Indo-Pacific. Again, unofficial views. So what is India's strategy here? Well, we do not have official relations with Taiwan. We follow the One China policy officially, meaning India only recognizes the regime in Beijing. But under Prime Minister Modi, the relationship has changed. In 2014, he invited Taiwan's representative for his swearing-in ceremony. It was considered a bold move. But in 2019, for his second term, there was no such invite. This was before the clashes in Galwan. India was still hoping to salvage its relationship with China. But after 2020, the change is more prominent. Taiwan's Deputy Trade Minister visited India in 2022. They're also planning to set up a cultural exchange center in Mumbai. 2 of them already exist in Chennai and New Delhi. Why is India doing this? Just a dozen countries in the world recognize Taiwan, so why is New Delhi pursuing closer ties with a de facto pariah? For 3 major reasons. 1 is the China factor, of course. Taiwan is an easy way to needle China. It can reduce Beijing's focus on Ladakh and the border with India, sort of like a 2-front distraction. The second is investments. Taiwan is a world leader in semiconductors or chips. They make up around 60% of all chips and around 90% of the most advanced ones. So India needs Taiwan's help to become a chip hub. It's easier said than done though. Taiwan's Foxconn was supposed to build a chip plant in India. The project was worth $19 billion. But last month they pulled out. Was it a setback? Yes, it was. But despite that, both sides need each other. Taiwan, for example, needs to diversify. In 2010, around 80% of their foreign investment went to China. It was far from ideal. Your biggest threat cannot be your top investment destination. So now Taiwan is looking for options. Last year, China made up just 33% of Taiwan's investments. India will be looking to capitalize on this shift. Taiwanese experts say investments to India could increase 8 times in 5 years. And finally, reason number 3, strategic imperatives. A war in Taiwan won't be limited to that region. The whole world will feel the shock. So all countries, including India, have a stake. I'm not saying we'll be dragged into the war, but India will have some big decisions to take. For example, if the West asks India for refueling bases or for military supplies, what are we going to do? What if China mounts a 2-front offensive to keep New Delhi engaged? How do we counter the chip shortage? All these questions will have to be answered. The defense forces are already on the job. Reports say India's Chief of Defense Staff has asked all 3 services for options. Basically, what should India do if war breaks out? That's where unofficial diplomacy is so important. You can exchange ideas, you can compare plans. You can also get information about your enemy's weaknesses. And no one knows the PLA better than Taiwan. Their strategies, their strengths, their weaknesses. Taipei can share all of that with New Delhi. Unlike in Ukraine, this war, if it happens, whenever it happens, will have direct consequences for India. So information and cooperation is key. You can't just bet on common sense prevailing. It's not exactly China's strong suit. Just last week, they released a new documentary on a possible invasion on Taiwan, a possible invasion. The documentary is called Chasing Dreams. It has 8 episodes in total, very detailed ones too. They feature interviews with multiple Chinese soldiers. All of them said the same thing. They would give up their lives to capture Taiwan. Simply put, it's a suicide mission. So we can never rule out the possibility of a Chinese attack. We've seen how bad their economy is. Who knows, maybe Xi Jinping will want a distraction. So India needs to be prepared for all scenarios, including the worst case scenarios. I know it's impossible to shift away from the one China policy, but diluting it is very much possible, and that's something India is certainly looking at. Every group has fixed roles. You have the funny one, the shy one, the serious one, and then you have the one who spoils all plans. The spoil sport in the group of 20 or G20 is China. Reports say Beijing has a problem with India's motto for the G20, this one, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is a Sanskrit phrase derived from the Upanishads. It means the world is one family. Now you would think it's a non-controversial one. Why wouldn't someone like this? Why wouldn't you like the world to be one family? Well, China doesn't. Reports say they have objected to including it in all outcome documents, like the one released after the finance ministers meet or after the energy ministers meeting or the tourism ministers meeting, all of them. These documents do not mention Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. They only mention an English version of it. One earth, one family, one future. There is one exception though. The foreign ministers meeting document does mention the Sanskrit phrase, and who knows, maybe that's why Chingang lost his job. But jokes aside, what is China's objection? Beijing says Sanskrit is not an official language of the United Nations. The UN has 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Spanish, and Russian. No Indian language is part of it. So China says you can't put Sanskrit on official texts. Letterheads are fine, the G20 website is fine, but on meeting documents, a strict no. What about the other members? Do they also have an objection? Reports say most of them sided with India, and why not? This is argument for argument's sake. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is among the oldest philosophies in India. The world needs a dose of it right now. We are fighting wars with other countries, with nature, even with ourselves. So the idea that Earth should be one family is positive. Instead of encouraging it, China is shooting it down. Not surprising though. China has repeatedly tried to derail India's G20 presidency. In the month of May this year, a G20 meeting was held in Jammu and Kashmir. China skipped it. Before that, in the month of March, there was a meeting in Arunachal Pradesh. Again, China skipped it. What reasons did they give? On Kashmir, they said the territory is disputed. As for Arunachal, they claim the state as their own. But this time, the Chinese have outdone themselves. They have objected over language. It's as petty as it gets. So what exactly are they playing at? We can think of 2 possibilities. Number 1, an attempt to tarnish India's image. This is India's first ever time presiding over the G20. New Delhi has been promoting it a lot. Plus, this year has been diplomatically very important for India. Some big visits to the US and France, some crucial balancing acts between Russia and the West, and also the presidency of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India was the president this year. The G20 is supposed to be the crowning moment, the culmination of everything India has achieved this year. So a successful summit is key for New Delhi. India's image as a bridging power is at stake, and China knows this. If the leaders are unable to agree on a joint statement, it's an embarrassment for India. Possibility number 2, a tit-for-tat move. India has been quietly resisting China's efforts to expand the SCO and BRICS. China wants to turn them into anti-Western blocs. India is unwilling to do that. So could this be retribution? You hurt us in BRICS, we hurt you in the G20. If that is the case, it is petty. This year's G20 was supposed to be about the global south, about issues like climate change and sustainable growth. China is risking all of that for petty politics. And these minor objections could be setting the stage for a bigger one. Xi Jinping skipping the G20 meeting. It's scheduled for September this year, next month. So far, Xi Jinping's travel to India has not been announced. And like it or not, you can't discuss the global south without China. It is home to more than 1.4 billion people. It is the second largest economy in the world. So China's presence is important. They could have used their influence positively to shape the talks. Instead, they're holding the G20 hostage over 2 Sanskrit words. India's Chandrayaan-3 is getting closer to the moon. It has entered the lunar orbit, even sent back some pictures of the moon. The landing is scheduled for the 23rd of August, but it looks like Chandrayaan may have a new competitor now. Russia's Luna 25. It is Moscow's first lunar mission in 50 years, and it too wants to land near the South Pole. So it's a race to the moon, and India and Russia are not the only ones. The US and China are also staking claims. Looks like the moon is the hottest piece of cosmic real estate right now. But the big question is, who will win this race? Our next report tells you.
3, 2, 1. We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
International tensions can be quite volatile, but countries are taking their feud to a new location. They're racing to stake their claim on the moon. Yes, you heard that right. While some nations are still arguing about borders on Earth, others are extending their territorial ambitions, this time all the way to the moon. The primary suspects are the same as the ones on Earth, the United States and China. America is going back to the moon, but this time to stay. At least that's NASA's plan for now, and they want to do it before China. This is part of America's Artemis project. It wants to send humans to the moon at least by 2030. But why again? Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin have already done it once, and they did it 50 years ago. So why is NASA going back to the moon? The answer could be FOMO, the fear of missing out, or the need to come first in everything. NASA's moon mission may not sound exciting, because why do the same thing again? But they're doing it anyway. That's because China is now focused on the moon. They want to send citizens there. They're planning a lunar base. All of these before 2030. China has its eyes set on the moon, and it's not going down well with Washington. NASA Chief Bill Nelson even mentioned it in a press conference. He said America was in a space race with China and wants to win. Why? Because America is wary. Nelson cited the South China Sea as an example. He said if China could stake its claims there, it could do so on the moon too. NASA wants to assure that resources on the moon are available to all, so it wants to get there first. But it's not just a race between the US and China. Other nations too are part of the space race, like India and Russia.
3, 2, 1, 0.
India launched Chandrayaan-3 on July 14th. It's already released some images of the moon. Chandrayaan-3 is supposed to land on the moon on August 23rd. If successful, India will be the first country to land on the South Pole. It will also be the fourth nation to achieve a lunar soft landing, after the US, the former Soviet Union, and China. But the Chandrayaan now has a new competitor. Moscow is launching its lander on August 11th. This is Russia's first lunar mission since 1976. With this, it plans to return to the moon for the first time in 50 years. The Luna plans to land near the South Pole, and according to the calculated timetable, it may get there around the same time. So, is it a race on who gets there first? Well, Russia says no. It says the two missions will not get into each other's way. That's because they have different landing areas. So, while the space is for everyone, it looks like the race is now heating up. Countries are aiming for the moon, and it's a battle on who gets there first. Who knew that a celestial body could become the stage for such a race for geopolitical dominance? But one thing's for sure, when it comes to reaching for the stars, or the moon here, mankind's penchant for competition knows no bounds.
Now, speaking of the G20, one of the events was held in Kashmir, and it has had quite an impact. Officials say it has boosted tourism in Kashmir, so much so that it's poised to break all records. We are only in the month of August, and more than 1.2 crore tourists have visited Kashmir. It is back on the global tourism map. There was a time when the valley was a paradise for visitors. Bollywood films were shot in Kashmir. Foreign tourists flocked in big numbers. But violence and terrorism sponsored by Pakistan drove people away in the last few decades. Our next report tells you about the turnaround.
Tourism in Kashmir is back with a bang. After a few years of turmoil, visitors are flocking to the scenic mountains again. In 2021, over 11 million tourists went to Kashmir. And the upward push continued last year. Now, we don't have official data from 2022 yet, but Kashmir's Lieutenant Governor, Manoj Sinha, says almost 19 million tourists went to Kashmir last year. That would make 2022 the best year for tourism in Kashmir so far. And there's good news in store. That number is set to be eclipsed this year. According to officials, Kashmir has seen almost 13 million tourists already this year. And we're barely in August. Kashmir is aiming high. It has set itself a target of more than 20 million tourists by the end of this year. The numbers show that it's well on its way. So, how has the administration pulled this off? Well, it has taken a multidimensional approach. One way is promoting Kashmir tourism aggressively. The government has been setting up stalls across India to encourage visitors. It has been showcasing the beauty of Kashmir and reminding people that militancy has fallen, so Kashmir is safe to visit. While that's an old school tactic, tried and tested, there has been some out-of-the-box thinking as well. One of the new strategies has been expanding the area for tourism. Kashmir's Tourism Secretary recently announced 300 new spots that will be promoted as tourism destinations. This includes area in the Kashmir Valley and also in the Jammu region. Last weekend, the Lal Draman Hill Station in the Doda region of Jammu saw a 2-day mega tourism festival. Since these places aren't too frequented, different forms of tourism can be promoted. Things like homestays or even adventure tourism. These activities have the government's backing. And of course, nothing showed the Modi government's dedication to Kashmiri tourism like the recent G20 tourism meet. India held this summit in picturesque Srinagar. This is how the delegates were greeted.
You've seen for yourself, and this is an opportunity for you to see with your own eyes what it's all about. Jammu Kashmir has moved on, the common man has moved on.
Every effort was made to show that Kashmir is ready for tourists. When he says moved on, he means from terrorism. Kashmir has borne the brunt of Pakistan's misadventures, which obviously made tourists wary. But it's now turning over a new leaf.
We've had about 18.8 million tourists in 2022, which is the highest ever in the last 3 decades. Highest ever in 2022. 18 million. We expect this number to keep going up in a very big way.
The number of foreign tourists in Kashmir is up to 18,000 already this year, the highest in the last 3 decades. Last year, the number was at about 4,000. So that's a 4.5 time increase. And the year's not even over yet. So the tourism boom, or shall we say bloom, in the Kashmir Valley looks more than just seasonal.
And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Turkey, a strong gust of wind took a man away with it. In the US, a giant tornado swept through the state of Colorado. Meanwhile, practicing yoga is good for your mind and your body. Having pets can brighten your dull day. Some yoga enthusiasts in New Delhi, in India, have mixed the two, creating a perfect way to unwind and de-stress. And finally, what makes August the 9th significant? On this day in 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. The bomb was codenamed Fat Man. About 40,000 people were killed immediately. This led to Japan's unconditional surrender in the Second World War. That'll be all for now. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
You're welcome.